All right, y'all. So for today's video, your brother, your uncle, your favorite realtor's favorite realtor is going to help you score your next listing appointment without feeling the need to sound like someone who you are not. If this is your first time watching, this is your favorite realtor's favorite realtor, Marvin, at soldbymarvin.com. If you want to learn more tips and strategies like what we're going to share in today's video, please join my absolutely free Facebook group. The link to do so is in the description of this video. All right, so we're going to jump right in, guys. I want to walk you through my exact framework on how I score 94.7% of my listing appointments that have converted to many millions of dollars of real estate sold. And the way that I go about it is I consider myself contrarian when it comes to how I approach real estate. If you listen to any favorite guru or real estate coach, they're going to tell you to go into your listing appointment with a pretty packet, a suit and tie, and you have to walk in there and take 45 minutes to give them, in effect, another version of a timeshare presentation to score that listing. And if any of you have been on a timeshare presentation, you know that you would rather listen to nails on a chalkboard than go through a timeshare presentation. I don't want you guys to approach your listing appointments trying to sound like what you think the gurus want you to sound like. I want you to be your most authentic self. So I'm going to show you exactly how I prepare, how I prepare, and ultimately how I close 94.7% of my listings. So the first thing that you have to remember, y'all, is that the listing is won before you walk in to that listing appointment. When you are approached by someone either through your sphere or through a ad that you've run or a social media post, you have to have a series of micro meetings versus trying to close them on one gigantic 45-minute to an hour presentation, because our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. And I can almost assure you that if you walk into your next listing appointment with a big packet and a bunch of slides that you're going to go over and all this stuff, you're going to go over that seller's head and you're going to quickly lose their attention, probably within the first 5 minutes. So how I would suggest you start your listing appointment is when that lead comes in, either again through your sphere of influence or social media or however they find you, set up a Zoom call, because what that's going to do is it's going to put a little bit of a wall between you and that individual, especially if this is your first time meeting them and them meeting you. Obviously, if you have a presence on social media, if you've been doing this long enough, you realize that there are a lot of weirdos that are out there. And to my female agents, it can definitely be a security risk for male agents as well. But a lot of times, individuals that you might think are well meaning and actually interested in selling a house may actually just be trying to shoot their shot at you, whether you're a male or a female. So you got to protect yourself. And I always suggest that you get on a Zoom call with that individual, because, for one, it'll give you an opportunity to get a feel for them and for them to get a feel for you and learn your expectations in this process. So I think speed to lead only is applicable. And I talked about this on my daily morning call. If you want to join my daily call, where every Monday through Friday, I hop on a call with a bunch of agents for 15 minutes tops. Sometimes we go a little bit over if we're really cooking, but I have a daily morning call at 9:30 a.m. Eastern. If you want to jump on that call, the link to do it is in the description below. But we talked about this morning about not being overly aggressive at your listing appointments and also not coming off super ignorant. So in the initial conversation, when that lead reaches out to you, yeah, I would take that through a phone call, but then ultimately I'm trying to book a Zoom call with that individual. And so what I would do, at least on the initial phone conversation, is I find out the address, if they're willing to provide that to me. I ask them what their timeline is to sell, whether they're looking to sell right now or in 3 to 6 months and they kind of want to get ahead of it, and if they're going to be needing to purchase another home after they sell their property. The reason that I want to find these three things out is it's going to let me know how far along in the process that seller is, and then also if it's going to turn into not just one, but two transactions, again, on the listing sale side, and then helping them buy their next home. Then when I schedule the Zoom call, between the point I got off the phone with them till my Zoom call, I'm doing my due diligence. I'm running a number of CMAs. I don't just use one software, and I don't suggest that you do the same, but run a couple of CMAs using various softwares to give you an idea of what the value is going to be of said property. And then also, what I like to do is I'll run the individual through something like Forewarn, or I'll just Google their name to see if anything comes up that I should be concerned about from a safety and a security standpoint. And then ultimately, when I hop on a Zoom call with them, I'm asking them the following questions. And this Zoom call shouldn't last longer than 10 to 15 minutes unless they're asking you a lot of questions. And that's always a good sign, because the third meeting is going to be at their property. And that's really pretty much when you have soft closed the business. So, something I see a lot of real estate agents do on either the Zoom call or meeting them at the property is they lead with what they've done. They say that they've been in the business 20 years. They've sold X amount of homes in the last year, and they say, I am a top 1% producer in my market. Nobody knows where this arbitrary top 1% title comes from. If you find out, let me know. But people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. That's a very cliche statement, but it's very apropos for this situation here when you're meeting the client. It's very easy to try to lead with all the things that you've done and you're doing and all this stuff. And in a sense, I can get why you might think that's going to show credibility or experience for the individual that you're going to meet. But what if you're a brand new agent or semi new agent, or you haven't been in the business very long? Or maybe you've worked with a ton of buyers, but this is your first listing appointment. There's a very different dynamic that just because you've done a thing for a long time doesn't necessarily mean you've done it right. And it definitely doesn't mean you're going to do it to the expectation of your seller. So what I like to do when I'm having my conversation with the seller is I'll ask them a very simple question. Before I show you anything, Mr. or Mrs. Seller, I want to really fully understand what winning, aka selling your home, looks like for you. And then I ask them the following questions. I want to know, why are you moving? What's the motivation? Are you downsizing? Are you in a situation where you got a job and you got to sell your home quickly? What is the situation? Is it a divorce? Is there something going on that's causing you to move? You have to ask those questions in order to be more of I like to consider myself a real estate doctor, if you will. If you go to your doctor's office, they're not just going to throw a prescription out at you. They're going to listen to you and listen to what your concerns are, what your ailment is, and they're going to go through their mental Rolodex in their mind before they actually prescribe a suggestion for you. So you have to approach this thing kind of like a family doctor, and you're trying to hear what their symptoms are or their motivations so that you can give accurate advice. So the next question I ask the seller is, what is your timeline to sell? Do you have a property that you've already picked out in your next destination? Is there a certain time that you have to be out of this property? What exactly does that look like? Or do you have time to just stay in the home until ultimately an offer comes through? That's going to help me gauge how motivated they need to be in order to sell. And for my market presentation, my CMA, that's going to let me know whether we need to be very aggressive in our pricing, or if we can afford to stay closer to the top of the market because the seller has done some really nice upgrades to the home and the comparables show that they're in a really good position if they're willing to wait to actually make a lot of money at the sale of their home. And then the next thing that I ask them is, what are some of the things that might frustrate you most in this process? Is it that you don't want people in your home without wearing shoes? Do you okay with people coming to your home with pets? What are some of those things that, during this process, because Mr. and Mrs. Seller, there's going to be a lot of bodies walking through your home. So what are some things that might be a little bit of a frustration that you kind of want to make sure does not happen when we start this sales process? Because that's going to help you in the private notes of your listing. Let a potential buyer's agent that's looking to show your property have an idea of what the expectations are going to be when they walk into said home. Are they not going to want to do showings after 6 o'clock p.m. because they're going to be home cooking and they don't want it to be very disruptive? Do they not want kids or pets in the home, or do they want to make sure that anybody that walks through either takes their shoes off, or you provide as the listing agent, the little shoe booties that they can put on because maybe they've got someone in the home with allergies? All that kind of stuff would help you understand their mindset and what they're hoping does not happen, in the purchasing of their home, and you can get ahead of that as the real estate agent. Hey, if you've made it this far in the video and you are a real estate professional, consider partnering with me here at Real Brokerage. Pay nothing per month, get a fantastic split, and you have the opportunity to build a business through revenue share and stock purchases. Book a call at the link below in today's video, and I'm happy to have a conversation on why I was able to grow my business exponentially by moving my practice to Real Brokerage. All right, back to the video. So understand that the real objection when you're dealing with a seller, and this is when you're actually in the home having a conversation after the initial Zoom call, the real objection is not commission, y'all. It's your confidence. So if a seller's not fully bought in, they're usually going to say one of three things. They're going to say something to the effect of, we're interviewing other agents, so we kind of wanted to hear what you have to say. They might say, well, we met with an agent and they're willing to sell my home for 1%. Are you willing to lower your fee? It helps me as the salesperson, for one, not negotiate myself and actually learn what are the most important things to them in an agent that they're going to work with. And if they lead with the will you lower your fee conversation, I'm very, I'm real chill about it. I'm not, confrontational or adversarial. I don't say, no, I'm not going to lower my fee. I asked them, well, if you did find an agent, or since you did find an agent that was willing to lower your fee, what were some of the factors that went into you not deciding to officially work with them? Because I would think if that was something that was the most important thing to you, you would have signed on the dotted line. I actually put that logic back on them in a very friendly way. I'm not, I'm not necessarily trying to be snarky or anything like that, but it's curiosity. I genuinely want to know if that's what you're leading with. Well, why didn't you go with them? And they may say, oh, well, we're just trying to, kind of see what other people have to say. And I bring up one of my favorite quotes that I've heard. I didn't come up with this, but I always lead with the three-way rule. If you want something fast and cheap, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, then it won't be good. If you want something good and cheap, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, then it won't be fast. If you want something fast and good, then it won't be cheap. I think I covered all three, right? So I'm asking them as the seller, if that's the biggest factor for you, this is when the education kicks in for me. And I tell them, well, something you may not know is that, real estate rules have changed. So you as the seller are not obligated to pay a buyer's agent their commission, whereas previously it was kind of a soft requirement that you pay a buyer's agent something to the tune of maybe 2 or 3%. That's no longer the case. Were you aware of that, Mr. or Mrs. Seller? And then a lot of times they weren't aware of that. So now that we've knocked that concern out of the way, now the only conversation we're having is my compensation as the agent. But even leading with that, they tend to think that if it's 4, 5, or 6%, that's all going to go to you as the listing agent. And of course, we know very rarely does that happen unless you also bring the buyer into the picture. But in many cases, your commission is split down the middle. If it's 6%, for example, then you as the agent, listing agent, keep 3, the buyer's agent keeps 3. And that's something that you would educate that client on. But I would ask them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'll be honest with you, I'm not the most expensive agent that's out there, but I'm also not the cheapest because I treat every single property that I list like it's my own. So it's a lot of prep work that my team and I do to put your home in the best position to sell. And then the contract negotiations that take place, you have an advocate that's fighting for you. And Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I'll be honest with you, if you decided to go with an agent that was very quick to negotiate themselves down and say that they'll sell your home for 1% or something, is that really going to be someone that you can depend on to be a bulldog for you when an offer comes from a buyer that is significantly, lower than what you were expecting? Do you think that agent's really going to be able to really advocate for you if they couldn't even advocate for themselves and the work that they're going to do? And I'm silent. Again, I'm not being facetious. I'm not being snarky. I'm putting their logic back on them, because you can't walk into a doctor's office and decide you're going to pay that doctor, a percentage of what they charge. charge you, right? Especially if you don't have insurance. You're really in trouble. But you can't walk into any type of service-based business, to my knowledge, and negotiate the services that are being offered if you want the best of the best. Yeah, maybe you could do it if it's somebody brand new to this, but I would suggest to any agent watching this, don't undercut yourself. Maybe you're more willing to lower your price if there are certain factors like, maybe the home really doesn't need a whole lot of prep work, or it's logistically close to you that if you need to get to the home on a regular basis, it's not a big deal because it's very close to you, or you're doing a favor for someone that you've worked with in the past. There are extenuating circumstances that, you may want to adjust your fee, especially if it's a situation where the seller's not going to walk away with a lot to begin with because maybe they had to sell their home abruptly, so it didn't build up enough equity. Use your own best judgment before you actually make the decision to undercut yourself, but ask them these questions. Again, the good, fast, and cheap analogy is what I walk through with them. And if they explain to me what two are the most important to them, well, that means that the third one is going to be a factor in pricing. And then when we talk pricing strategy, try not to go into your listing appointment with a number out of the gate until you find out a couple of things. When you're at that property, I strongly suggest, yes, you have your comparables on an iPad, or that would be the only thing that you print out. Try not to have more than like 2 or 3 pages. Keep it very simple for the seller, but let them know that the amount or the price that you're going to at least quote them is a preliminary number, and that it could change based on a couple of things. For one, you want to walk the property with them and learn a little bit more about the history of the property. What all has taken place before they own the property? What all have they done to the property since their ownership? For example, if they have upgraded the entire first floor and it initially had carpet, but they upgraded it into hardwood, for example, and it just looks great. Like they did actual wood, not laminate, not LVP, but actual straight hardwood, right? And your comparables show other homes that have sold that had carpet all over the place. That lets you know, okay, this could be something that gives the home more value, closer to the top of the comparable. Maybe there is some deferred maintenance that they need to take care of. Maybe the roof has not been replaced in the seller's tenure and it's coming up on its end of use. That's a conversation that you'll make a mental note of, that when you're actually getting ready to get the listing agreement signed after you've walked the property, that's where you'll bring up, these are some of the circumstances that could cause us to be a little lower on the comparable or a little bit higher. In every situation, don't give an exact number, give a range. That way, it gives them the ability, based on when you come back to them with the final, hey, this is some of the deferred maintenance that we talked about. You mentioned that you hadn't done this. You mentioned that you have done this, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. So I feel confident if we were to list the market now of being within this price range. But if they're willing to make certain repairs that will not be super costly to them, but will really increase the value of that property when it's officially listed, and put them in the best position to not get lowballed by a buyer because it's a bunch of deferred maintenance and they just think that the home is just going to sell because they lived in it, right? That's you being an educator and a facilitator for your clients. You will help them get the most money possible by making some of those minor tweaks. One of the biggest things that I think a lot of sellers overlook is the importance of getting all creepy crawlies, AKA rats and roaches, out of that property before they list that home. There is nothing worse, y'all, than walking into a home as I'm doing a showing and I see a roommate scurry across the property and I got to play it off like I didn't just see what I just see. Or I'll do you one better. Here in Georgia, hornets are a thing, right? So I've walked into properties where there was a literal hornet's nest near the entrance of the door, and I don't do bugs that sting. So I'm like, I jump back like, oh Lord, and the buyer, they're just like, they're folks from the country, so they weren't tripping, but I was because I'm not used to that. So if you're working with a seller and you notice that there is some type of rodent activity, roach activity, ants, whatever, suggest to them that they get that addressed before you go to list their property. especially if they don't have a termite bond on the property. In many cases, that could hurt them come contract time if there is not active, if you live in a place where termites are a thing, if there's not active, termite pest control that are keeping those termites from a property, right? So you as the, soon to be listing agent have to know when to say no in a very respectful way to your seller, because they could have issues with their property and that seller is still insistent on pricing their home in a very unrealistic pricing that the comparables that you've researched do not support. And what I tend to do if the seller is insistent on a certain level of pricing is I tell them, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I know this is your home. I know that this is the number you would like to get because you had a neighbor that 2 or 3 years ago sold at that price. But I remind them that, the market is all about timing and values fluctuate depending on the time you're ready to sell. So I don't have any comparables here, and I've done the research all over the vicinity of your zip code, and I don't have any comparable properties that will support this. So, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, I think it's important to remember, especially if we get an offer that has an appraisal contingency, that if the home is not priced in a value that an appraiser would agree to, then that will severely affect the amount that you're actually going to take home, right? If you're in a situation where it's an FHA, we have to walk through this in a very strategic way because whatever value the appraiser comes up with on the FHA side of things, if we get an FHA buyer, that's going to stick with that property. So if you feel like the home should be priced at this level, let's meet in the middle somewhere, right? And if after 2 weeks we don't get any serious activity, then let's bring the price down to what I'm suggesting, keeping in mind that any reduction in price, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, is going to show on your Zillows, on your Realtor.coms. So I think it's very important that, especially because you explained to me that timing is everything and we need to sell this property quick, fast, and in a hurry, we've got to be a little bit more on the aggressive side. And my goal and my objective is once we get an offer in house, I'm going to do my job to get you the most money possible and sell this home as quickly as possible, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. You just have to be confident in your information that you're presenting to your seller. Because remember, y'all, you are the individual that is licensed to do what it is that you do in your respective state. You know more than that seller thinks that they know. Yes, it's their home, but your job is to be agnostic and look at the data to make sure that the data supports the pricing that they want to go with. If it doesn't, at least you did your job in explaining that you cannot find any information that supports this pricing. So you're not making it like it's you coming up with the price. It's the data, it's the information, it's the due diligence that you did on the pricing side of things that's letting them know that they might be dealing with a little bit of irrationality in the pricing of their home. But ultimately, if that's what they want to start with, it is their home. So we do what the sellers ask us to do. So towards the end of your face-to-face listing appointment, I want you to avoid doing a few things. Avoid asking that seller a question like, so what are you thinking? Or do you want to move forward? Avoid those types of statements because what it does is it leaves a little bit of gray. It leaves room for them to say, I'm not sure. I don't know, Marvin. I want you to lead like this. Based on everything that we've discussed, I think that it would be advantageous to get this home on the market within the next 7 to 14 days so that we hit the first wave of buyers, Mr. and Mrs. Seller. What day next week can I get my photographer in the property? You're leading with an assumptive close. You're assuming that this person knows that you know what you're doing and that they're dealing with a consummate professional and that you are ready to go ahead and do everything that needs to be done to get this home on the market. Of course, if they say, well, I don't know, I got to do XYZ, things like maybe getting the pest control done or some of those little minor things, getting the home clean, getting portraits taken down, all that stuff can usually be done within about a week, right? So by giving it a buffer of about 7 to 14 days, you're telling them, hey, within the next 2 weeks, we're going to get this home on the market. So we have now until that point to do the prep work necessary, getting the home clean because you got cleaners you work with, getting the pest control done because you got a pest control company in your Rolodex, and getting that home prepared for the photography pictures. You are assuming the close. So after you say that, let silence be your friend. And a separating comment that it might be a hot take and you might be like, Marv, I could really say that. Yes, try it in your own language and see how this works for you. Mr. and Mrs. Seller, my job is not to tell you necessarily what you want to hear, but to provide you the information that gets your home sold as quickly as possible. If we are aligned in that capacity, I'm excited to work with you. What you're doing is you're laying the groundwork that yes, you are the seller, and yes, this is your asset, but you have hired a professional. So, me as a professional, I got a job to do, and it may not always be what you want to hear. We may even butt heads from time to time, but ultimately, we are working in partnership with a common goal, which is to get your home sold as quickly as possible for as much as possible. So, if we're in agreement in that, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, everything is going to be Irie. That's how I walk through it. And I hope it helps you score your next listing appointment. If you are following this channel, I've talked about, how I score listings from for sale by owners by using a open house conversion strategy for my for sale by owners. That's on the channel. You can look at some of the playlist here, but let me know in the comments below if you are in agreement with the structure and the strategy that I mentioned. If there's anything that you disagree with or something you would have done a little bit differently in my presentation to my sellers, let me know in the comments below and let's keep the conversation going. And before you go, YouTube thinks that this video right here is going to be advantageous to your day. So I'm going to scoot out of the way and point to it here. I don't want to get in the video's way. So tap on this video before you leave the channel. And if you get value, as always, be sure to subscribe. All right, y'all, I will catch you on the next one. Peace.